provider.
Where's her voice? She didn't say recording in progress.
Oh.
Ooh, she was
It's
offended.
not. Is it recording in progress?
Yeah, she was offended. Okay, let's get started. Let me put this on my little tripod. Okay, here we go. Dave Schmidt is
And
coming.
here I thought maybe there was a reason the Vatican II hymnals were out.
Well, a bonfire.
No, they're actually really good hymnals, except that the print is too small. They're very traditional hymnals.
Right.
Much more traditional than our St. Augustine's hymnals.
Really?
Yeah, they do not have their hymn words rewritten to avoid vertical language or he referring to God and things like that.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's good. Okay, let's get underway. Dave Schmidt. I was promoting my talk for tomorrow night at LocalCon.
I didn't miss anything.
Dave Schmidt rips me mercilessly, and he like comes to all my stuff. Like I love this guy. His actions, not words. His words are so mean and offensive. His actions are so loving. He's always there.
He doesn't want to miss a single opportunity to
Yeah.
make fun of you more.
Dave Schmidt. When people find out that I am like a Polish duke or something, and I have all these castles in Europe. Yeah, when Dave Schmidt has a castle, I'll be like, "Well, did you come to my talks?" You know, like when he has people massaging his feet, feeding him grapes. He's like, "Yeah, that okay. Friends take care of friends." So I was saying tomorrow night. Tomorrow night, my talk is going to be the most abstract ever. It's a dialogue, 30 minutes nonstop, between a guy getting psychoanalyzed who's an atheist who's going to catechize us because despite being an atheist, his favorite book is the Catechism, and he's going to talk about what fake and real religion is. And his psychiatrist is a Southern hick redneck guy, of which I will do a Southern accent in order to break the dialogue apart nicely so people know what parts are which. And Becca Schmidt seemed to support that idea, so that's good. Okay, Sophia as well. Good. This is excellent. All right.
What time is that?
Yeah, I think. See, this is what I don't get. Like, people don't want to come to my talks, which like that boggles my mind. Like seriously, this is like I don't want to go see an original Picasso exhibit. But if people don't want to come see my talks, like it's free dinner as well. Like, isn't that what all young people care about is eating food that they don't pay for? You know, like I thought about doing a promotional poster for the Hippo Talk, just like free food, all the thing, like talk and fine print. You know, just have people have been tricked.
It might make more difference to adults who have families if they could just bring their whole family and not have to cook dinner.
Yeah, why don't they do that? Well, Bessie, you could wait, Bessie. Well, that's a great idea. And when you come, you could. Oh wait, you're not going to be there. Oh, okay, got it. So you can't help at all, actually.
Where's Maria?
I mean, she has been showing up a couple minutes late the past few times.
Maria's freaking awesome. I'm so glad she's in this class. She's super cool. She
She's
adds a
not
lot
in
of cool
this
things.
class.
She is not currently. I'm glad that she's part of this class. She adds a lot of good commentary. Like all you guys, she's a valued member of our circle. Maybe that's her right now. It'd be awesome if it was. It's Claire. Claire is also a valued member. Claire, I'm glad to see you. Claire is very nice, very intelligent, and brings lots of good stuff to the class. So that's what we're looking for here. Welcome, Claire.
Isn't Claire or Gracjan?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, right. Claire's from Ypres, Belgium. Exactly. That's right. Yeah, I forgot that. Yeah, she's Belgian as well. It's cool. Okay, 1916 in the East. Let's get this underway. Okay. First point. January, Serbian army finally defeated. Yeah, from July 14th. Remember in the early lectures, I showed you, I think it was the first photos that I had for you, really after showing you pictures of Franz Ferdinand and Sophie and their family. One of the first photos I showed you was the opening of hostilities across the river. And that the Great War, despite people believing it begins with the Battle of the Frontiers and the attack through Belgium, the Schlieffen Plan, in August of 1914, it actually begins on July 29th, right? It begins almost a month after the assassination. It's good to jog our memories. Remember the assassination, June 28th, 1914? After that July crisis, a month later. Well, yeah, the Serbs, who can we compare the Serbs to? The Serbs in this eastern/southern front are seen by the bigger powers like who? And both powers proved to have a lot more fight than people gave them credit for. Who am I talking about? Claire, you don't have to sing your national anthem, but who am I talking about? The Belgians, right? The Belgians are like, okay, chocolate soldiers, they're just shopkeepers, they can't fight. And look what a beautiful and heroic resistance they put up in the face of the German army. It's literally like, I mean, I want to say the Idaho Vandals playing an NFL team, they'll get destroyed, but it's really Idaho Vandals playing any team. Idaho Vandals are like Belgium, and it's like they're going to get eventually run over, but they're going to try their best.
Except for Simon.
Except for
Fraser.
Simon Fraser, who is like, what Simon Fraser is like.
Italy.
And what's worse is they're Canadian Italians. It's like straight F all the way around. It's like double. It's like being really bad at fighting and being nice, too nice to fight. It's like great combination. Yeah, it's like the Canadian Italian Simon Fraser football team, who lost 68-0 to the Idaho Vandals. Which at that point, like, you should deny your own name. You should be like, I'm not me. Like, wow. Okay. I kid because I love. For people in the internet who are watching this later, I love the Idaho Vandals. The Kibbe Dome is like Chernobyl. It's beautiful, super unique. Which, if people hear this the first time, they're like, it's like a nuclear disaster that melted down and caused whole chaos and an exclusion zone where you can't go in. I mean, in a positive sense. It's like Chernobyl.
In a positive
In a good way. Right?
I mean,
This is going nowhere, yeah. I got good laughs in my WSU class once. When I talked about the Kibbe Dome, one time, when I talked about the Kibbe Dome, I was like, it's like Chernobyl, and maybe it's like the contamination dome because the Vandals play so bad, it's like a nuclear disaster. WSU kids like that. That was funny. But I think they give me the kind of frat laugh like that. I think it's really funny, but I can't admit it's funny. Like the girl that I like, did she see that I didn't think it was that funny? I'm so cool. You know, that kind of thing, you know. Seriously, yeah, okay. The Serbs finally are defeated by a coalition in January of 1916 of the Austro-Hungarians, the Germans, and what key country? Anyone know? This is going to be actually a very interesting kind of thing. Jog your mind back to the Balkan Wars. If you know this answer, I'd be like ridiculously impressed. I'm not trying to be nice. All of you this semester have proven like this is actually serious and sincere. Like how freaking crazy intelligent you are. Like remembering some of the stuff, the explanations. I'm really that's why I love this class so much. You guys are the highest caliber. But this is almost like just we don't talk about this enough. If you know this answer, I'd be really shocked. This is actually very hard. What country? We know that the Germans helping the Austro-Hungarians, it's like shackled to a corpse. The Germans say famously, the Germans are always saving the bacon of the Austro-Hungarians. But what country really makes the difference here in the Balkans? Bulgaria. The fact that Bulgaria, this neighbor of Serbia, helps out on the side of, I want to say the Axis, but the Central Powers, the German powers, Austro-Hungary and Germany, that makes the big difference. So the Serbs are finally fully defeated. But it's again one of these kind of Pyrrhic, casualty-ridden attrition victories. The Austro-Hungarians lose double, right? Austro-Hungary 100 to 50,000 casualty deficit. They lose double the men. This doesn't help, right? If you win a victory, but you lose a bunch of guys, this is again, we constantly come back to this. The one loss is a tragedy and sad, but putting that aside for a second, not at the risk of being dehumanizing, but looking at it like a football game, looking at like numbers on a map, I just mean strategically. If you're always losing a bunch of men and your opponent is not, you can be have the most rudimentary knowledge of military strategy and realize that's bad, right? So Austro-Hungary wins, but the Serbs wins, but at a high cost. But finally the Serbs, which the Austro-Hungarians thought in the July crisis would be anything but pesky. They thought they would be full Belgian chocolate soldiers, that assumption stereotype. Why don't we just immediately go in after Franz Ferdinand's assassination, clean this up and get out? The Serbs are a joke. We'll occupy their capital within 2 weeks and just wash our hands, and all of Europe will be on our side because obviously it'll be a just war responding to the assassination of our heir to the throne. Nothing goes according to that plan at all, as you remember from July crisis until now. The fact that it takes 16 months or so for the Serbs to finally be defeated. The big question I have for you on the board here, SRB for allies or own, are the Serbs really fighting for the allies or themselves in the Balkans? What do you think? And this is an open question. I'm not saying, aha, I'm gonna give you the right answer. This is kind of there's no right answer. Just what do you think? Are the Serbs more interested in fighting with the French and the Russians and the British for what they can perhaps help them with, these large power brokers in the Balkans? Or are they really fighting for themselves? What would be your guess from what we talked about in the earlier lectures? And then I'll tell you where I stand. Clearly, I have a clear answer myself, but I want to hear what you guys think first.
Probably more for Serbia rather than for the bigger powers, like maybe to some extent, like Russia, just because of like Slavic camaraderie, but other than that, I don't think they care much about the British and the French.
Okay, very fair answer. Anyone else?
I mean, I was gonna say something similar, like they had no ties really with like the with Britain and France. It was just that like they were friends with Russia and Russia was friends with Britain and France, and this whole war started with like just Serbia and Austria-Hungary, and like everyone else decided to get involved, but still like
Okay,
it's just them.
yeah, all right.
We're talking about Serbia.
Mhm.
I think Serbia is such a small country, there's no point in fighting for themselves, obviously.
Okay,
They're fighting for their connections to bigger power, because
Okay.
they know they don't have power. That
Fine.
makes sense.
yeah, that's very fair too.
I think
I-
that's the form of fighting for yourself. in a
Yeah,
way.
yeah, agreed,
Yeah.
agreed.
I think they fight for themselves because that's what we all.
Also, yeah, great. All these answers are perfect. They're great answers. I tend to lean towards what Dominic opened with, that they're definitely fighting for themselves. If you remember the whole part of the assassination of Black Hand, Gavrilo Princip, always people was all about Serbian self-determination, a greater Serbia. What happens in the two Balkan wars? The big results are Serbia increases by 80% in territory influence. Now, Claire and Dave, your excellent point. Well, but aren't the Serbs receiving loans from the French and weapons already in during the time of the Pig War in 1908, that area? Yeah. Did the Serbians write this kind of on one knee begging the Tsar, dear, daddy Tsar, almost literally of that pleading sense, please help your Slavic brethren? So it's a little bit of both. I would say, and again, I'm serious. My answer doesn't carry more weight than yours. I'm being totally sincere. Who cares? Like, this is an open question. I would lean more towards for themselves because they seem to be obsessed with this idea, even back to their kind of like the myth of Kosovo in 1389. They seem to be obsessed with the idea of Serbia for Serbs. They're insanely nationalistic. It's kind of like if there was a war in America and a lot of Texans are involved. If you were to make an argument, Texas for Texas, Texas has its own power grid. It was its own country for 9 years between 1836 and 45. Texas maybe is the most nationalistic state in the union, arguably. Right. Whereas like someone like, Indiana, I don't know I've never heard of Indiana nationalism. Like it's always part of the union, right? So I think Serbia does tend towards that, but they do have these larger connections, maybe it's a little bit of both. Number two, Gallipoli finally ends January 9th. We're not going to talk at all about Gallipoli today. We talked about Gallipoli in fair detail, 15 minutes or so, whatever is allowable in this class. All we have to cover. But you remember Gallipoli. We have not liked how it's going on the Western Front. We, the Allies, in particular Winston Churchill, let's open up the southern soft belly of the German war machine and attack their Turkish allies. Oh, by the way, this will be awesome. We'll obviously destroy the Turks. Again, maybe the theme of today's class is chocolate soldier assumption. The Turks are a joke. We'll roll over them in like 5 days, and then we'll throw a bone to the Russians, our allies. Say, here, come take Constantinople. This will help us with the war. Gallipoli, remember, is an epic, horrible failure, out of which New Zealand and Australian nationalism is forged. The Anzac Cove, these hero men went into after the worst kind of hellish gunfire. It was trench warfare, but uphill and on a beach and in the worst conditions, in that freezing to death in the winter, scorching sun during the summer. And Gallipoli is a long, long campaign. It almost lasts an entire year, right? They're already thinking about opening it in February of 2015. Minesweeping in March and April, doesn't end until January of the next year. But it's a clear Ottoman victory over the Allies. Clear victory for the German side. Number three, GB, Great Britain Military Service Act of 1916. It conscripted men 18 to 41 years old. And before the exemptions, talk about what exemptions, I'll read them to you in a second, but this is part and parcel with what? What did we talk about last class in terms of draft, remember? And what was the little difference?
Can't remember what country that was. It was taken any one body, basically.
Germans, right? Remember
That's what, wasn't that when you're at total war, you did that?
Total War, the Hindenburg program, which we're going to hint at Verdun again in this class. Next class, if you follow the syllabus, we're only talking about 2 battles. They are so important that we're going to spend the entire class talking about Verdun, the Battle of Verdun, and the Battle of the Somme. Am I going to give each, 45 minutes each, whatever, but like it's going to be the most detailed focus class, I think, just 2 battles. So we'll finally get to that. But we said last class too, after the Battle of Verdun and when Falkenhayn was removed in August of 1916, getting ahead of our timeline now, but again, the Germans realized exactly any warm bodies, including men up to 51 years old. This is not as extreme, but 41 is, yeah, it's not 41 of today, back then, right? Okay, here's the exemptions though, interesting, right? So 18 to 41, but they actually allowed a lot of exemptions. Men who were married, men who were widowed with children, those serving in the Royal Navy, that's not really an exemption. Like you're in the freaking Navy, like of course you can't be in the Army as well, right? Like, you know what I mean?
I'm glad they wrote that.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for saying that. Like you're so we're having a draft by this next war and people in the Air Force are accepted. It's like, no shit, dude. Like, yeah, seriously. A minister of religion or working of a number of different kind of essential professions. So maybe here's more of this kind of Hindenburg program that you talked about correctly, Dave. That, hey, we have Betsy, beautiful point. We have a total war economy. We need people in the factories. So you're exempted if you're producing war material, perhaps. Maybe if you don't want to fight in the war, that's the job to get. Be the person producing the munitions and stuff, because we need you doing that as well. But also, they actually allow for conscientious objection. That's not how it seems in America, right? We hinted at that. We're going to do a whole class on America. I think it's coming up pretty soon. America up to 1916. I know you can't wait. I know everyone here has at least one tattoo related to America. I have a bald eagle eating the UN on my back. Like, who's the boss now? That's the question I have below. I'm not even kidding. Prove I don't, Dave. Prove it. Prove I don't. You can't see through my shirt. I do. I have America runs the world. I know everyone's not excited to talk about America. And we will. And we hinted last class and said, with Benjamin Salmon, remember the famous kind of conscientious objector in America, he goes to jail. Eugene Debs, a socialist leader, is tried basically under the Sedition Act. And for I don't know how to put it more on the nose than fomenting sedition, possible rebellion against the government. So this seems to be pretty liberal as in like wide open, like, you can get exemptions for a lot of reasons. And some seem very, very legit, of course, right? All right, here's where we move off the east. It's February 1916, South African Battle of Silvia Hill. My apologies to anyone who's followed this class and is like, this is a world war. I wish Gracjan would talk more about the battle of Mount Kilimanjaro. There was one. Remind me, let's talk about that later. Kilimanjaro is the highest mountain in Africa. It's apparently very easy to summit. People said it's a very nice brisk walk up 20,000 feet, which is pretty cool. No sarcasm there. It's actually true. It's very easy. It's not like climbing Everest or K2, but that's cool. Kilimanjaro. I've talked a little about Persia, modern day Iran, but again, I've said many times, this is truly a global war. For the purpose of this class, I want to focus on America and Europe because Europe, obviously, because that is the battle. This is the great European war. The people being conscripted, like the colonial African soldiers in the French army, who a lot of them have suffered terrible casualties in the Battle of the Frontiers. They're coming from Africa, coming from different parts of the country to Europe. So of course, Europe has to be prime focus, and us being Americans and the role America plays, as well. So I apologize for taking time. We haven't been able to broaden the lens too much, but here's one simple broadening the lens. So you have Germans fighting against the South Africans in South Africa. On the South African side, what do we tragically know about South Africa in the 20th century?
Extremely racist.
Right, and so, surprise, surprise, sadly, this battle is known for its racism. In a certain sense, it breaks down into a no-go situation in a sense, when the Dutch white guys, the Afrikaners, South African guys, don't want to fight with Indian soldiers. Indian soldiers, of course, being part of the British Empire, they don't want it to be in the same lines. And it's the only answer here is racism. That's the reason why. It's not, they're beneath us kind of thing. So even in this small way, even in this terribly small way, I hope already you've seen like 16 things so far, and by the end of this class, 68 things that happened in the Great War that are today. We were speaking about the pro-life movement before. When is Planned Parenthood founded? Does anyone know? In 1916, in the First World War, by Margaret Sanger in New York City. We're going to talk about the domestic home front, Planned Parenthood, the fight over the pro-life movement, pro-abortion people. That's also World War I. Like, I hope you leave this class like, yeah, everything happened in this time. Everything happened in these 4 years.
How is it? I can see it being at the same time, but there's coincidence and there's correlation. I mean,
I'm not saying, yeah, this is not causation, correlation, blah, 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 whatever, however that goes. It's not, Margaret Sanger doesn't found Planned Parenthood because of World War I. It just happens to have coincidentally happened during that time.
It's just a really, really strong eugenics area.
Movement, right? Exactly. Madison Grant, this guy wrote this really racist book, something like The Decline of the White Race or something like. He's just totally on the nose title. He doesn't care to hide it. Just like, yeah. And it's like, I think it's 1916 as well. The eugenics movement gets a huge punch in the gut, obviously, with the horrible, evil stuff that happens in Nazi Germany, where a lot of people who were doing eugenics in America in the 1910s are like, well, we never did that. Wait a second. Oh, that wasn't us. Like, yeah, right. It's like, I have all your evidence here. America was the #1 eugenics country in the world by far. Anyways, we'll talk about Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood in the domestic lectures on America. But here, again, apartheid, Nelson Mandela, okay, even in the First World War in South Africa, surprise, surprise, sadly, you have this, one of the biggest examples is over racism. They can't even fight a battle against the Germans because of the racists that we don't want to fight with Indian soldiers. Okay, so that's sad. Okay, number 5, I think we're on. Yeah, Portugal enters the war on the side of the Allies. Portugal is a very interesting country. We're going to talk about Portugal very, very focused in this class when it comes to where Blessed Mother appears. Obviously, Fatima, as you know, is in Portugal. And the Blessed Mother apparently told the children, which is really cool and hopeful, the faith will never be lost in Portugal. Those of you that know even a little bit about Fatima, you probably heard that, like the true faith will always be maintained there. Whether that's,
I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
Where was Spain, speaking of Portugal, where was Spain during all of that?
I think they're both kind of out of the war. They're not involved. Like, I think Spain might actually be completely neutral the whole time. That's why it's interesting in some ways, the Spanish flu. We're gonna do a little preview. We're gonna have a whole class in the Spanish flu. Obviously, again, how apropos, right? We're living through something identical, in a certain sense, 200 years ago. Again, once more, maybe that's number 69, number 70 of things that happened that they're coincide with our reality now. But I think it was named the Spanish flu in a certain sense, and people said in some way, I do have different stocks in that way. They are named because Spain was not part of the war, and we'll talk about the Spanish flu later on. But Portugal enters the war, all right? Portugal wants to make Britain happy, make Big Daddy GB happy, because Britain says, if you guys do that, we'll help you with your colonies. And Portugal's like, all right, we're already an irrelevant country, let's not be less irrelevant. And Portugal is irrelevant, I'm serious. Portugal is irrelevant on the world stage since what great event? What makes Portugal? Because Portugal was the #1 colonial power. Portugal is first in the colonial game. Portugal gets out there, out ahead of the Spanish, out ahead of Germany and Italy, placed in the sun. They're 400 years late to what Portugal had already did, mapping the world, the great sailors, the navigators they had. What event cripples Portugal? And
Finding in the New World.
no, they would say that's good for them, right? Today there's this great debate, right? Like, and it is true. We should condemn the atrocities committed, by the conquistadors and all that. But that at this time, they're not. No, that finding the New World, opening up ports, the idea that Brazil speaks Portuguese, right? That was good for them, expanding their kind of global footprint, empirical footprint. What event cripples? Anyone know? The Lisbon Earthquake, November 1st, 1755. You read a book called The Great Fire. I think it's called Apocalypse in Ancient Greece by a guy named Mark Molesky. Molesky. It was second runner-up for the LA Times Book Award. Molesky actually was my professor at Seton Hall University in 2006. He's a really, really smart guy. It's one of the rare instances that I have of that. Like, it was not like, oh yeah, every professor that taught me, they wrote a famous book or something. Like, no, actually none of them. This is the one guy that I had him in class, and he's a really good historian. His book is excellent. This book is it's about, on November 1st, All Saints Day, an earthquake happens in the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Lisbon, equivalent to like 9 hydrogen bombs being detonated at once, like 8.2. It destroys the city, first of all. First, the earthquake destroys the city. Then it gets set on fire because all the candles were lit for All Saints Day. And then the 50-foot wave tsunami destroys the city again. Like, it's like 3 days, just completely wrecks the city. And it's a great question of like, is this God's punishment upon us? It's a great, great book. I highly recommend you read it. Again, if you just look up Mark Molesky, Lisbon Earthquake book, you'll find it. Very nice. It's an easy read. He's a brilliant dude. If I said that, enough times already. He's a very good writer. It's written at a high level. It's like, oh, it's easy. It's like, but it's simple. That it reads like a fiction. It's a very good book. Civilian deaths in Portugal during the war would eventually be 20% of a million, over 200,000. But 138,000 have been caused by the Spanish flu. That's the Spanish flu preview I have here. please realize when you're talking about the Spanish flu, and I'll tell you all the conspiracies about the Spanish flu. Do you ever know the number one conspiracy of the Spanish flu? So the traditional story of the Spanish flu is just, it was the flu, right? Sorry, like, it's a bad flu strain. You know, I think the Spanish flu is H1N1, right? Is that correct? You know, it still circulates, right? You know, and stuff, and it's become endemic now, like, but it's just, there's nothing, but you don't know what the conspiracy, the main conspiracy behind the Spanish flu is. And when I say this too, again, like, please differentiate, I think, between like the earth is flat conspiracy, which is really, really stupid. I'm 99.99999, as much as I can say without being 100%, the earth is freaking not flat. That's dumb. It's a dumb conspiracy. You know, like, or the moon landing was fake. That's pretty freaking stupid. I think, you know, if you think the moon landing is fake, fine. I'll hear you out. Seriously. Like, I believe honestly only in theories. And the only thing that matters is either true or false. However stupid something is, okay, I'll hear anyone on whatever theory. But I'm saying there's some theories that are really like expletive deleted stupid, just dumb. Like, there are people that actually believe like the world leaders are like actual lizards. This is like this is like gross and embarrassing, right? Like, again, go ahead, tell me why. Try to convince me. I think that's absolutely just like shockingly like you're an idiot. But then there's other theories that are just like, okay, you know, well, they're not as tinfoil hat. Let's talk about them. Does anyone know what the one is with the Spanish flu? That actually originated in Kansas at Fort Riley, and it was the product of a vaccine experiment. They were trying to vaccinate, I think, against meningitis, and somehow they did all this kind of like stuff on these soldiers, and that caused that it went haywire somehow. Even the doctors talked about this in their official notes. There wasn't this kind of cover up, or, you know, we can't talk about these kind of ideas. This is taboo, you know, whatever, we're gonna deplatform people. It was like the doctors wrote in their notes like, we're glad going forward with this vaccine campaign because vaccines are good. Look what they've done, you know, against different smallpox and whatever. And I think it was meningitis. Don't quote me on that, but there's some kind of disease that was really affecting the soldiers, and we need there's outbreaks to stop it. But they said we're worried that this can have an adverse effect and that can put evolutionary pressure on something like so. That's the kind of the theory. And so America, I get it. We were like, we don't want to be blamed. Call it the Kansas disaster, the Kansas pandemic. So call it the Spanish flu. We'll talk about those things. We talk about the whole lecture. I am not an epidemiologist, virologist, and I'm not even that smart, period, in general. So I don't know, like, I'm not 100% sure where it comes out, but I would say that it'll be fun in this class to talk about these different theories. That is not a theory that came to like the earth is flat. That's actually, let's talk about it. Let's talk about why people think this, right? A dumb one, I think, I've heard another one, this is kind of an earth is flat one, I think, but that, is caused by radio waves.
Maybe I found it. German subs caused the Spanish flu.
German subs caused it. You've heard that one? No, I've never heard that one before. Really, why?
Subs never wash their hands. You know.
A New York Times article quoted a U.S. Army official who suggested that influenza had been planted on the country's east coast by enemy agents.
It's possible. I mean, isn't this the whole thing? Are we ever going to get to the bottom of COVID? I hope so, God willing. What happened? Seriously, what happened with COVID? Really? Anyone tell me? Like, does anyone actually know? Beyond just nonsense, like finger pointing, you know, whatever. I'm serious. I hope we get to, I hope. The problem is when something is so dangerous like this, it's scary, and so it's a worldwide event. A lot of people have a vested interest for you not to know the truth, right? So that's kind of, you know, who knows? But we'll come back to that theory too. That one seems, I'm not saying plausible. I'm saying that that's a legit theory. That's not, why would the Germans not do that? Right. They're releasing poisonous gas that causes people to, you know, their mucous membranes to be stripped off and drown, but they would never do a pandemic. That's going too far. You know, well, releasing gas is okay in a battlefield, but not doing, you know, biological warfare. What, you know what I mean? So I'm not saying that that's true or that will prove to hold any water whatsoever. But okay, let's hear it out when we get to that class. All right.
I just read why it's called the Spanish.
Why is that?
Because of the war, all the Allied and Central Powers, and kind of paraphrasing, suppressed news of the flu.
Ooh, okay. Spain not
being
involved could have a free press.
Exactly,
Okay.
and so people make it.
Got it. So that's brilliant. Thanks.
That is interesting.
I had heard that before. I forgot. Thank you for reminding me. Right. So all of the like news is coming out of Spain, therefore. Okay.
And the follow-up, in Spain, they called it the French flu.
Uh-huh.
So they're not gonna.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess we'll just call it. We did it. You know, right? Yeah, we'll embrace it.
No,
Yeah, right. The Spanish lecture is gonna be a good one. I think it's our penultimate lecture, second to last one. I think the Spanish flu is the last or third last before we talk about Versailles and the interwar period. Just wrapping up. Lake Narak offensive, 1916 unsuccessful Russian offensive on the Eastern Front. Surprise, surprise. Again, Russians, right? March 18th to 30th, the Russians try to attack the Germans. They get their butt kicked. I have here on notes. 1,000th time, problem of lack of reconnaissance. I think the Russians would learn, right? 1,000th time, they haven't done their homework. They don't know what they're doing. They don't have communications. The Lake Narak offensive. The offensive is the Russians attacking the Germans. They fail. I promise I'll come back to number 7. You're like, what is that? I'll come back in a second. But A through D. 8A is that this was the first point was it was launched at the request of France. We'll talk about that in a second. But it was launched at the request of France. France hoping that Russia attacking. Again, the Schlieffen plan thing never goes away. If they attack the Germans on that side, the Germans have to relieve troops from Verdun and send reinforcements to the east, and that'll clear up some air in the Eastern Front. The Russian 8B, the Russian initial artillery bombardment was quite long, for 2 days instead of like 3 or 4 hours in the attack, but it was very inaccurate. This is a big problem too. The Germans were amazing in artillery, Russians were awful. I am a big Russophile. I speak Russian. I love the Russian culture, which is weird for a Pole, right?
Yeah.
Poles and Russians are supposed to hate each other. I think Russia's really cool.
And you're both supposed to hate Ukraine.
Exactly, right, which I don't. Well, maybe kind of. Yeah, maybe actually totally. So I'm not trying to bash the Russians, but they sucked at artillery. They sucked at mathematics, it seemed like. They didn't understand how to use it, just terrible long bombardment, nothing happens. When they go across no man's land, this is 8C. And here's the really sad thing, my friends. The Russians, in a certain sense, copy Douglas Haig's style in doing what? So it's Lake Narak offensive 8A, it's initiated. Russia against the Germans on the request of France. But if they do it, the Germans have to take troops from Verdun and send them to support the Eastern Front. We've got all that, but it's a massive failure because the artillery doesn't do what it's supposed to do. It doesn't clear out the guns of the Germans, doesn't clear out the German men. What is Douglas Haig's strategy? Well, what's the problem, right? What do we say was like so scandalous?
He just like kept sending.
Just send people across no man's land.
Send.
And this is called here either the human wave attack or human sea attack. Both are just, it's heartbreakingly sad. They sent people across open no man's land after artillery failed completely, as if like ocean tides coming in. And just like the tides crashing on the shore, they're totally crashed down by the German guns. They're not affected at all. Okay, and here says it all. 8D. The Germans in Lake Narak offensive, despite the Russians having numerical superiority going into battle, the Germans lose 80,000 people. The Russians lose 370,000, more than 4.2 times. The Russians lose 1/3 of a million people in this Lake Narak offensive, while the Germans suffer less than 100,000. That says it all. It's 4.2 to 1. For every one person, the Germans lose, the Russians lose 4.2. On top of that, their artillery is not successful. It's just a complete, utter, epic, disastrous fail.
So how far into the war were tanks invented?
As far as I understand, tanks are, we'll talk about this in, I think, 1917. Go ahead.
Yeah.
It's 16. I sent you an email.
You sent me an email.
Remember
I thought
You dreamt it.
you sent me a meme. I never responded to you. Sorry.
No, it's okay. It was 1916 is the
Okay.
first time we saw one. It was operated or whatever by the British. And the trivia thing was they're called tanks because partly because of during development, they want to keep a secret weapon, you know. But then even on the field, they tried to make it look as much as they could like a water tank. And that word stuck.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay. But of course, it was like the British and the Americans who did tanks and stuff and not the Russians. Was that, or did the Russians ever get them?
I don't know who else.
They
got
were
it.
I
not
think
good
when they're
to-
released, thank you for the date, but I think when they're released, the British are angry. Churchill's angry because he's like, this is like gas again. When they used gas the first time, they couldn't exploit it. Churchill's like, we should have waited instead of showing them what we have until we have like a whole fleet and then using them for a crushing breakthrough. I think they're used at the Battle of Cambrai at the end of 1917. But yeah, these are not the kind of Panzer tanks of the Second
Yeah,
World
they're
War.
not good.
Yeah. I think they literally go like 2 miles an hour. I think they're slower than a man walking.
But does that
Like,
matter if
all
you can get across the no man's land?
Well, the Germans being the Germans, they're like, oh, you have a huge tank? We're gonna build a hole this big. And then boop, oh, sorry, we're not gonna pull you out now. And then, this isn't funny. Again, I'm not gonna, if this was,
But so the British invented tanks, so you're saying the British were bothered by tanks, or some British were upset by
the
them?
the British were upset they weren't used effectively.
Yeah.
That when they're used the first time, they like put 2 on the battlefield, and the Germans like, oh, they have these things, now we can prepare. Churchill was upset they didn't wait till they had like 50
Oh, I
of
see.
them
That
and use
makes
them all at once
sense.
and
Okay.
crush the whole line. Yeah,
Okay.
this was stupid. It's like, imagine if I'm like, in the football game, I have a player that and I have a special play, a trick play, right? And the coach is like, listen, whatever we do, use it in the 4th quarter to win the game, like last play. And a guy does it to start the game and it fails. Like, well, now they know we do this thing. Now the element of surprise is gone. Like, you blew it for no reason. You use it too soon.
And I misspoke, it was 1915.
1915, are you okay? Wow.
And it was named Little Willie.
Someone
British.
got in trouble for that name. Okay, the Chantilly Conference. The Chantilly Conference is the reason for the Lake Merrick Offensive. In December of 1915, this is the only thing we're talking about in 1915 in this whole 1916 in the East lecture, except for Dave Schmidt's comment on the tanks. But in 1915, the Allies get together and they have a combined plan. And basically, all you have to know, my friends, and everybody watching online, is that in 1915, the Allies say, listen, guys, as we hopefully try to make a breakthrough on the Western Front, in this hardened Western Front, post First Ypres, race to the sea, the whole trench warfare from the English Channel all the way down to Switzerland, as we French and British work on the Germans there, you Russian dudes have to help us. You have to do something against the Germans, the Eastern Front. I know you've been getting just it handed to you over and over again, but please help us. That inspires Nicholas to do this offensive. Remember, he's in charge, the Tsar, and they lose almost 5-1 casualties. That doesn't, the Germans, if we're keeping score, the Germans who've been winning the whole time, they're still winning. They're still winning the whole time. The Polish legions, number 10, are very interesting. They're a military force established in 1914. What's interesting is they have kind of a dual loyalty in a certain sense. Poland is a true middle land. So Józef Pilsudski, we'll talk about him in the inner warfare. He's this great Polish leader of the inner warfare. I think he's Polish president from 1926 to 35. A lot of these guys, the Poles are fighting on the side of the Austro-Hungarians against the Russians. Again, the joke Dominic and I made a couple minutes ago. The hatred of Poles for Russia is very, very deep and mutual. The Russians celebrate their Independence Day, which I think happened in the early 1600s when the Poles were expelled from Moscow. Like, it's a long standing, but they're very much brothers in a sense. The Polish and Russian language are they're not almost identical, but they're very close, very much Slavic people, but Catholics, Orthodox, this, so many things, so much water under that bridge. The Polish legions are fighting on the side of the Austro-Hungarians. Later in the war, they'll switch over to the Entente because they see which way the wind is blowing. They're in the middle, right? World War II commences when Germany attacks Poland from one side and Russia, Soviets from the other side. They're between Germany and Russia. And they're like, there comes a point later in the war where Pilsudski and the Polish leadership and the legions, all these soldiers, the legions are like this crack force, like special forces, these horsemen, cavalry guys. When they realize, like, yeah, we've been fighting the Russians and they're on the Entente, but the Entente is where our bread is going to be buttered. In fact, Woodrow Wilson, we'll talk about him later in the class, his 13th point of his 14th point address is what? The establishment of a free and independent Poland with access to the sea. So Poland switches, they refuse to swear an oath of allegiance to the Kaiser. They don't want German hegemony, they want to be ruled by the Germans. Poland is very much like Serbia, you can say in that sense. Poles are very nationalistic people. It's very, very, and it's kind of like whoever helps us out. In the Polish national anthem, there's literally a line, Napoleon Bonaparte showed us how to do it, like how to pick up the sword and fight our oppressors. And whoever can liberate us Poles will side with them with the idea being we want a free and independent Poland at the end. The Poles were going to name recently a fort in Poland, Fort Trump. And they're going to be called Fort Biden now. I don't know. But there's actually a joke in the Polish media, like you call it Fort Biden. It's like because Poles are like, well, we still fear like the growing power of Russia and Putin over there and want to be part of NATO and the UN. We don't want to be too much in the UN, we want to be independent, but we also want to be on the Poles are always trying to balance this very tragic, historically middle spot between West and East. Poland is very much the Bow ideal definition of Central Europe, right in the middle of these competing things. Last couple of things, Battle of Transylvania, Bucharest. Battle of Transylvania in the fall of Bucharest is, you can say, the triumph of Falkenhayn. Falkenhayn is relieved from Verdun. August 29th, 1916. Who takes over for Falkenhayn? Remember? Who? Tell me. Now, I need to know. Hurry. 3, 2, 1. He takes-
Chocolate milk guy.
No, chocolate milk guy is eliminated immediately. Von Moltke has a nervous breakdown, he's out. Who takes over for Falkenhayn? On the Western Front? Ludendorff and Hindenburg, right? Ludendorff and Hindenburg. Falkenhayn is sent to Transylvania, and he does actually an amazing job. Historians would say the Germans come and they mop up Romania. Romania, ooh, you guys wanted to get inside the Allies? It's just one thing after the other. This is the fall of 2016, autumn of 2016. The Germans completely, at this point, you can say the Germans have neutralized the Balkans. The Balkans are neutralized. Romania out, full circle. Who do we start with outing, getting out of the war? Serbia, Romania out. The Austria-Hungary, Germany has won kind of that at this point. The first front in the war to be decidedly won is the Balkan front. The Central Powers have won. Franz Josef, last point, will die, I think November 21st, 1916, and the man that succeeds him is Blessed Emperor Karl. This guy is beatified in the Catholic Church. Probably be canonized one day. The Peace Emperor. We'll talk a lot about him in this class. Do a whole lecture, I think, strictly on him. But the thing I want to close with, obviously, is the most effective Allied offensive of the entire war, the Brusilov offensive. Okay, point number 10, number 9. The Brusilov offensive is from June to September in Western Ukraine, WUKR, Western Ukraine, around the city of Lviv, Lemberg. We've talked a lot about this city, right? It's a very, very old Polish cultural city, which today is in modern day Ukraine. Again, the Poles call it Lviv, the Ukrainians Lviv. The Germified name is Lemberg, the Battle of Lemberg, early in the Eastern Front before Tannenberg. This is in this area. At #1 allies, but a huge cost. Okay, so can I please explain this to you? Can I please explain this to you? This is, I'm not kidding, the most effective offensive of the entire war. Yes, for the Allies, for anybody. Even the mopping up Germans in Transylvania. This is the greatest offensive of the whole war. It's the most successful. We're going to go and attack and bear great fruit from this. It works beautifully. And if you see my very primitive kind of picture with 3 arrows, it is just an all-out push on the line against the Austro-Hungarians that brings them stunning success. Brusilov's offensive is, let's say we have imagine in your mind on this line in Western Ukraine, let's say you have over a couple hundred miles, 15 posts. A lot of the leadership in Russia is let's just localize it. Maybe just attack at this point. Brusilov's no, I want everyone to get up at once and just go and attack. And it works beautifully. But I'll talk in a second, please keep in mind, it is at a huge cost. It decimates the German army. This victory, quote unquote, is also, as all things Russian in this war, a massive loss. And it will create the conditions for what, especially? For the Russian Revolution next year. This will create the conditions because the whole army is going to be gone. In a certain, it's weird. There's never been a more stunning victory. It's a bigger loss than the Brusilov offensive. Tactically, #1 victory. Wait till you hear the casualties. I think close to 1 million Russian soldiers died in this win. It's crazy. Claire, you had a question. Go ahead.
Oh, you just answered it.
Okay, so I'll take you through all the points. So 9-1, ultimate Pyrrhic victory, right? It works in strategy, but the seeds of defeat are later, so I want to talk about that. Points 9-2 and 9-3 is basically just that the brain trust in Russia didn't like the plan. They're attack and let's do point by point. Brusilov's no. Brusilov, point number 9-4, Brusilov does a great job of 2 things: amassing men and being deception. So Brusilov, as he lines up 40 infantry divisions and 15 cavalry, this is 55 total divisions against Austria-Hungary having 49. It's basically equal. 40 infantry divisions versus 39 for Austria-Hungary. It's basically an equal fight here. Equal. Russians have a little bit more, but it's not a huge advantage. He lines them up in a way that works great for tactical strategic deception, where the enemy doesn't know what he's going to do. For the first time, maybe you can say, the Germans, the Austro-Hungarians seem to be kind of at a loss often, but they have no clue what's going to happen. And they probably think what makes sense is to do these localized attacks, right? Well, Brusilov on June 4th, opens up with, unlike Lake Narok, a short bombardment and one that's effective. Here, let's give credit where credit's due. The mathematicians and the tacticians did a good job. They open up with a short artillery bombardment and then do an all-out attack. All right. 2 things work great here. This is point 9-5. You can say, the middle of the 10 points I have to do about this. Why does it work great? Well, duh, an effective bombardment is obviously great because because yeah, that's what's supposed to be effective. But it's effective because it doesn't allow, after the initial hit is successful, it doesn't give the people time to bring up reinforcements. So by the time the Austro-Hungarians know what hit them and they're trying to scatter, the Russians are already attacked across the whole line, all out attack. Okay. Now, a lot of these points are weak points along the line, point 10.96, and Austro-Hungarians almost immediately go into full retreat, and Russians take over 200,000 prisoners. Okay. By September, from July 28th, it's about 2 months after the start of it, June 4th, and then into September, his troops had reached the Carpathian Mountains. They've taken a lot of land back they lost ever since the start. They pushed the line hundreds of miles. Okay, but what is a common problem with taking land? Remember we talked about this like in that first battle of Artois. The British always have this problem. A great initial success, but then what happens after? Pushback and often overextension. Here, this is where it's so successful. They're not pushed back, they're just pushing forward, they're capturing, but they're just getting too far ahead of themselves. They can't supply. So again, that's great. June to September, greatest success of any offensive in the war. Russians go across the line, but here's where we have to start talking about some sad stuff. And the final point before I talk about the casualties, the sad stuff, is that Brusolov doesn't use the human wave attacks. Imagine how much worse it would be if it was. I mean, you can't really do human wave attacks when you're pursuing the enemy. It's not going to be across to a defensive position anyways, but he's learned some lesson. That here's a general, behold a general who actually, if not valuing life, maybe he did. Maybe he's also a good man, he valued life, but he also, at least tactically, wasn't stupid. Like, yeah, walk into machine gun fire. That's going to be the story of next class with the song. Austria-Hungary and Germany lose, have a casualty total of about 1.3 million combined. Okay, unbelievable numbers. Austria-Hungary and Germany, 1.3 million casualties. Russia, this is why it's a clear victory on top of it being so strategically effective. They only, this is so sad to say, only lose 1 million compared to 1.3 million. They win the casualty war. But Russia has been having a lot of Lake Naroks when the opponent, as I just said earlier, loses 80,000, they lose 370,000. This million is kind of the final straw. A lot of people actually on this front, after the Brusilov offensive cools down, later on just desert and just go across the enemy at some point. A lot of Russian soldiers will throw down their weapons. I think especially after the Russian Revolution commences, we'll talk about the Russian Revolution in great detail in this class. A lot of people just say, nope, I'm done. The Tsar abdicated, March 15th, 1917, I'm just gonna walk across the enemy line. And that's, if you wonder why the Russian Revolution is so successful for Lenin and the Bolsheviks, there's no one left to oppose it anymore. And in many ways, because of the success of this battle. Okay, we're done. Let me just show you the couple photos for you, not a lot today. And we'll be done. I'll see you guys on Thursday. All right. Okay, this is from, these first two are from South Africa, the Battle of Slieve Hill, right? Everywhere, even bringing this heavy artillery and stuff into these, places out, in far from the epicenter of where the war is taking place. This is now Lake Narok offensive. And you can tell the pointed hats are very emblematic of what army? Those pointed hats. Germans, yeah. These are the Polish legions, these next two photos. It looks cold, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Great.
The second battle of Missourian Lakes, right? February 1915, you guys are in like 3 feet of snow. How about the disastrous campaign in the Carpathian Mountains? People are having to climb mountains first in snow, and then why are you getting shot at by artillery? I mean, it's just a disaster.
I assume these are the generals on the left or something that are
Sure.
really fat ones.
Yeah, right, yeah, and like funny but sad. Yeah, exactly. Well, people are dying in the trenches, getting eaten by lice. They're getting fat, eating, foie gras and
That's
whatever.
actually the first tank we were talking about right there. That's him. That's Little Willie.
That's the guy. That's Big Willie. This is Polish legions from 1914, and the rest. This is Alexey Brusolov, the general. I showed you his picture probably, I think, earlier in the second class semester, but
No, he doesn't look huge like those.
he's not very lean. He was reputed for his six-pack abs. That he had a really big ego about. They're like, Brusolov, I get it, you're jacked, bro. Just stop already. He was always like, he apparently at the table once, he's like, well, we can try this tactic, or maybe this will scare them. He pick up his shirt and flex his ass. It's like, this guy, he was on Instagram the whole time taking those photos in the bathroom, like Jackie was, just got back from the gym, hashtag swole Alexey, just really, yeah, gross guy. This is, from
Someone who only has half a mustache.
when you have 6-pack abs, you don't need any mustache. That half is enough, he's giving you enough of respect there.
Who are those guys? You know, won't go back to one.
These dudes here,
Yeah, who's that? group?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you. Guys, I think Russian soldiers from the offensive, but I should probably know. If I have a photo, I should probably.
Well,
know.
no, I just, well, yeah.
No, I don't know.
should,
Yeah.
No, they just,
You should.
yeah. you should.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, listening on the interwebs, thank you for joining us for today's class, and I will see you all on Thursday. I hope all of you listening, the 320 people, wow. I hope you all attend my HIPPO lecture tomorrow night. So until then, see ya.